work in progress.
And at the same time, I feel like I'm working, but I'm not tapped into love right now. I'm tapped into work. Like, we're all here for work, but we're also here for love, and we're also here for joy. You all have work to do too. Oh, okay. This is just the beginning. My work is just the beginning. You have work to do. If you're going to be a part of this community, part of your work is to anchor where you are, your space where you are, clean your brain, fix yourself.
Okay.
Share it.
Okay.
Share them. Spread them. Help them get to more places. And any humans that need the medicine, it's there. Help the mushrooms do what they do. After all, they just use us to spread their soul. And we just use them to fix our mind.
Exactly. Fix your mind. And that's what I have been doing since 4 months, more or less.
I feel it's like this tunnel that goes down into yourself through the pain, through finding yourself, through your personal power, and then out the back to the ancestors, and then you line up with them, and it's like you line up and it clicks. And when it clicks, you see your path forward. It's like a line from the past to the future. And everything, this voice has been doing nothing but lining me up and nudging me closer and closer to that.
Yeah, about nudging you into a certain direction. I have been feeling this little by little, and it's really interesting, this whole process, since I've been at this in those 4 months, that work within and the inner shifts that have happened, especially in perspective and how deeply I now feel what is very important to me and what isn't, and how I really will cherish my sense of agency, how independent I want to become and free myself out of this prison of mind, as well as this situation. I really want to completely change what I'm doing, how I'm living. This is going to be a very interesting process. So this mandala is really driven by some different energy this time. And as you can see, I added all those runes already.
The rune Soilo. As you know, this rune literally means sun, the great celestial body, which is the center of our solar system. This is a rune regarded as being extremely positive, related to success and a sense of wholeness, quite obviously related to light and the power of revelation in one's spiritual quest. A life-giving force which gives us motivation, strength, the energy to act and go forward. Confidence in ourselves, and energy so bright that permits us to take action and therefore be successful. A rune of guidance, hope, the power of knowing and interiorizing our capacities, and by knowing our own power, might and strength, we are fearless and hopeful, self-reliant, which puts us in a position where we have a life purpose. And this positive flow of energy and emotions gives us faith in ourselves and in the path we have chosen and the choices we have taken. Again, a sense of wholeness and joy. Soilo is the rune that represents the seat of the soul. And it's this extremely and rare positive power the warmth of this power in our own conscious that we need to harness, control it, and transmute it from reflection into understanding, into energy, and finally apply that energy to action. Because enlightenment is nothing if we do not know how to apply it in our daily lives. Apply it in a way that we are able to continue to transmute thought into energy and use that energy to take action and continue to apply this energy in our lives. Always aiming to have a sense of purpose, setting a goal and channel all our thoughts towards that goal. When we know how to harness the energy of our own thoughts and direct it towards the objectives we have set for ourselves, we strengthen our psyche, our subconscious, and our spirit itself. And there is a great development of our spiritual will and power, which will ultimately lead us to enlightenment.
Urus.
The rune literally means horrocks, which were these prehistoric European bulls, great magnificent wild creatures hunted down till extinction. So, therefore, the rune is connected with physical strength, but also with life force and courage, physical health, endurance and vigor and healing. And in psychological terms, it's connected with determination and persistence, and also freedom and courage, of course, as I have mentioned, and one's free will and independence. This rune was primarily connected with the male gender because of physical strength, vitality, stamina, virility, and the uncontrollable rage and the warrior spirit. The main connections of this rune are with physical strength, health, courage, and endurance. Urus represents the horrocks, these wild bovine creatures. Now, divination work with this rune. Let's start with its upright meaning. Life's persistence and its endless resourcefulness in the tasks that we must perform in order to survive are implied within Urus. Thus, it is a rune of manifestation, regeneration, and of course endurance.
Those has impressive horns or antlers, if you would like, facing downwards. Antlers or horns facing downwards are in their power position, which means the animal has lowered his head and ready to charge. This stance reveals the full potential of the animal. Antlers and horns represent the wild and the untamed. When you pull this rune, we are told to go to the reindeer to be wise and gain strength. Physical energy comes from the fuel we place into our bodies. The rune Urus explores our energy levels and our thoughts on our everyday tasks. Look at the reindeer or look at the stock. When they point their antlers downwards, that simple movement holds the whole meaning of this rune, which is the sacred power of gestation and the miracle to create an action.
Kaunas, Kinas, or Can, and other variations of the same rune. It literally means torch. This is a rune linked to creativity. It is a source of light, inspiration, hope, and passion. It is the light that keeps darkness at bay. The torch is a symbol of knowledge and intellect, illumination, searching for enlightenment, giving enthusiasm in teaching and learning. It is the flame of knowledge, and as it is often said, knowledge is power. This rune symbolizes the knowledge handed on from generation to generation, which is why the words kaunas and ken are related to the words kin and kindred. This is the fire rune, but fire under human control. Control and harnessing fire for warmth and illumination. Fire is connected to creation, as I've told you when I have spoken about the rune Fehu, the power of transformation and the power to create. But the fire that Kinas represents is the fire we control to create things for ourselves. The power we have to create with our abilities, skills, creativity, and combined with the fire element, we become more than mere beasts. In prehistoric times, it was precisely because of the ability to control fire that we started to evolve rapidly. Fire kept the beasts of the night away, afraid to come closer. Fire gave us protection and warmth. It allowed us to cook food, changing our diets and behavior. Fire was the reason our ancestors started to form communities, gathering around the fire. People from different parts of the prehistoric landscape with their own stories to tell, sharing knowledge around the fire, and that knowledge being spread from place to place every time there was fire, which led people to gather around it. Since this is a rune connected to the ability and the will to generate and create, this is also a rune for artists and craftsmen, but also connected to the technical aspects of magic, the importance of controlling energy, and fire is energy. Creation also means creating life, a third life form, from the combination of two polarities, two opposites bound together, and this union brings life into manifestation. Therefore, this is a rune which is also associated with human passion, lust, and sexual love. Liquid fire in our veins, which gives us vitality, liveliness, energy, and almost uncontrollable power. Now let's talk about the mythology around this rune, so we can better understand its essence and how our ancestors explained, through metaphors, the power of the runes. Let's start with the creation aspect of this rune. The Norse mythology starts with the cosmic context of fire. Fire plays an important role in the creation of the cosmos. It is one of the two primal elements of creation. The fire which comes from Muspelheim, the world of fire, colliding with the world of ice, Niflheim, and this collision sparks the beginning of life, the Norse version of the Big Bang Theory. None lives in Muspelheim except those who were born into it, the fire giants. It is a dangerous place, no mortals dare to go. Fire is dangerous, but on the other hand, Midgard, the realm of mankind, was believed to owe its temperate and life-sustaining atmosphere to the delicate balance between the primal forces of fire and ice. So fire was also considered to be life-sustaining in its positive aspect. Now, the knowledge and protection aspects of this rune. As I have said, humanity's mastery of fire was a great step towards evolution, a source of power given by the gods themselves, as we read in many myths. In Norse mythology, Thor gave fire to humans, a god associated with the oak tree and lightning, probably indicating the very first myth of how fire was introduced to humans, coming from the sky. A great lightning bolt made an oak tree explode, and tiny bits of the tree aflame were used to make the first fires. With fire, many possibilities were suddenly open, and probably one of the most important was using fire to reclaim space from darkness. Before the ability to use fire, the world was much wilder and terrifying, especially during long dark nights. Before we learned how to make fire on demand, fire was probably kept burning all the time, watched, and having to constantly feed it so not to lose this source of power and illumination. Preserving the flame was taken with great care, and It must have taken on sacred associations, ritualistic acts even. Fire ensured the protection of the community, which is why fire and this rune are also associated with the god Heimdall, the protector of Asgard, the watchful guardian, the beacon of light. Heimdall is known as the shining god, personified by the torch. Bonfires and beacons lit on mountaintops in order to pass on news and warnings were likewise associated with Heimdall and the rune Kaunas. Now let's talk about the meaning of this rune in its upright position when it appears in a rune reading. On personal levels, this rune stands for warmth, friendship and love, what lies within our hearts. The purest feelings, the liquid fire of passion, is the path to happiness. The knowledge of the heart can be felt in both a physical and a mental sense. One may be passionate about a person or a subject, for instance, and when this rune appears in a rune reading, the concept of passion and of knowledge are often strangely mixed together. This rune literally means gift. It's a rune connected to giving and taking, trade or exchange between two parties, and, as we see in ancient Scandinavian societies, there was the belief that a gift calls for a gift. If something is given to you, to maintain the bonds of friendship, you must also give something in return. So this rune is also linked to sacrifice in ritualistic terms and in terms of worshipping the deities. If you take a close look at the symbol, it looks like a stylized representation of someone, an anthropomorphic figure with two arms in a gesture of pledging. In archaeological terms, we see these representations of humans with arms wide open towards the sky, since even before the Paleolithic, a gesture of worshipping and receiving the power of the deities through the palms of their hands, receiving the gift of the gods in their hands, absorbing the forces. A gesture that, in many religions, is still used when addressing a deity or deities. We see in Scandinavian societies that the exchange of power, the sacrifices, ceremonies, worshipping was through gifting. This was the most common way to show faith, not through prayers, but giving to the gods sacrificial animals, a bird portion of the crops, and valuable objects, so that the gods are obliged to give something in return to maintain the spiritual connection with mortals and vice versa. This rune represents the gifts the gods give to mortals to maintain the ecology of cosmic power. In terms of mythological accounts, we might understand the essence of this rune if we take a look at Odin as the archetypal king. You see, this rune reflects the important custom of giving gifts in Germanic and Norse cultures. Gift-giving strengthened bonds of friendship and community, and as such, generosity was one of the noblest of virtues. A ruler, doesn't matter if it's a chieftain or chiefess, a king or a queen, someone who is the parent figure of the community, must be generous in order to maintain the tribe, the clan, the subjects happy and under his or her control. A ruler gifted his followers in order to reward them for their loyalty. Odin, for instance, had a marvelous armor ring called Draupnir, which replicated itself into 8 other identical rings. This was the great treasure of Odin. As long as he possessed this ring, he would never lack of wealth. He would always have enough to sustain the gods and to distribute such wealth as it pleased him in order to maintain his followers happy and loyal. But it's not just about pure generosity. Giving gifts requires sacrifice from the person receiving the gift. Gifts weren't given freely, especially by Odin. It demands a gift in return. A price must be paid. The god Thor, for instance, protects Midgard against giants, and his job is to preserve order in the universe. The Vanir gods give mankind fertility and wealth in the form of fruits of both land and sea. Odin gifted mankind with breath, blood, and senses. He gave life. So all these gifts to mankind incorporate the principle of giving and sacrifice as an eternal cycle that binds all beings of the 9 cosmic worlds. Now, Leaving mythology aside, historically speaking, in Germanic, Norse, and Anglo-Saxon cultures, a chieftain or any other person with a certain status, a certain rank, could demonstrate his power by giving gifts to the poor or vagrant, and to trustworthy and loyal followers. By giving gifts, a person was not only demonstrating his wealth and power, but also generosity, a quality greatly appreciated among Norse and Germanic societies. This would bring good fame and more followers. More followers, more power and wealth. Another aspect, just as a gift demands a gift, an insult demanded recompense. There were many forms of insults, of course, and compensations for the loss, damage, or injury done. The injured parties would receive appropriate benefits to maintain order, to prevent blood feuds, to maintain the bonds of friendship, which is the true essence of this rune, Gable. Now, the meaning of this rune when it appears in a rune reading. This is the first rune that doesn't have an inverted meaning. Now, as I've been telling you throughout this video, the giving and receiving gifts has been important in every society as a gesture of mutual respect, a custom meant to bind people together. So in your life, all should be well as long as there are conditions between both parties, knowing and respecting the limitations of an agreement, even if nothing material is actually given, because there are gifts that are purely emotional, affectionate. Simple gratitude may be the form of payment for the gift received, but there must always be a gift in order to show gratitude for another gift, or resentment and quarrels will be the disastrous result of not showing appreciation. But this also applies to the person who is giving the gift. A gift should be given with an open heart, otherwise it will feel worthless for both parties. In love affairs, a true union is only achieved in separation, when people can maintain their individuality even when they are together. Always be yourself and don't become something you are not just to please others. In love affairs, your true gift to the other person is being true to yourself. Be the person the other one fell in love with. When this rune appears in a rune reading, you will feel honor-bound to help someone out very soon. However, you must know how much help you can give or should give. After all, too much generosity may lead this person to become overly reliant upon you, and instead of helping the person, you are making matters worse for both. Everyone must be free and not completely rely on others, because if that gift is taken away, the gift of helping, the very foundations of that reliance are taken away and people end up worse than they were when they asked for help. Gable has no inverted position, as I've said. Therefore, it means the gift of freedom is the most important gift of all, from which all other gifts flow. But never forget that there is always a price to pay even when you are free. Every decision you make requires the acceptance of one thing and simultaneous sacrifice or release of another. Avos. And acquiring the rune mysteries of life and death. Such is our own life of ups and downs, and at some point we all meet in the middle to share our experiences and the wisdom we gained in whichever path we walked through. This is a rune connected with the mysteries of death, the intemporal moments in between of every choice we must take to initiate a path towards wisdom, be that forward or going backwards. Therefore, it's a rune also associated with initiations, towards the hidden secrets, movement towards enlightenment, but also towards confusion, destruction, weakness, and death, because those are part of every path towards the deeper knowledge of the hidden secrets. Uwas is a rune that governs the initiation into the wisdom of the world tree, as a symbol of the spiritual development that will lead us to spiritual endurance until we are ready to face the darker aspects of life, which is death. It's a rune that symbolizes gaining endurance through hardships, so we might set ourselves free from the fear of death. Algis, which means elk. a rune often considered to be linked with protection, but Algis is also the representation of the higher self. Higher self as in to be in connection with the gods. This rune represents the spiritual state of listening, to be attentive to what surrounds us, beyond our perceptions of the physical world. We use our senses to be in contact with our own world, but at a certain point in life, we switch our sensibility into, well, a more sensitive state of mind. Instead of hearing, we listen. And instead of knowing, we understand. And this rune represents that very state of mind, awakening. We get closer to the divine, to a protective teaching force, into a spiritual sense of safety and protection. We are not certain what exactly the shape of this rune represents. Some runes are quite clear in their representations, always a stylized form somehow of their basic meanings. But maybe Algis is the representation of the elk or stag's antlers, which is the means of protection and defense of the animal and also its magnificent crown, reaching high into the skies, which might connect this rune to the cosmic stags that constantly bite at the needles of the world tree Yggdrasil. And if we look close at the common yew leaves, they certainly resemble the shape of Algis, and this sense of awakening and being in contact with the divine sphere is easily perceptible by the representation of the world tree itself, which connects the mortal realm to the spiritual realm and with the divine realm. The Old Norse word for this rune is Iruar, which either means yew tree or yew bow. Maybe the representation of the stags biting the needles of the great world tree is the representation of mankind, the representation of the human life and spirit, trying to reach the world of the gods. The stags are constantly nibbling at the world tree, just as we humans are always striving to have a little taste of the various spiritual forces that might connect us with the divine. The stags have a taste of the world tree, and the world tree is the metaphorical representation of what lies between the physical and the spiritual, the very pathway in between that links both realities. The name of this rune in the younger Futhark is Ir, which means you. So through time, it didn't lose its connection with the world tree Yggdrasil. Or maybe this rune can also be the stylized representation of ravens' feet, of the ravens of Odin, Hugin and Munin, Ugr and Mini, thought and memory. The representation of the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, where we store the knowledge we gain in the waking world, the knowledge of the past and the present, which gives us insight into the future, and where we store the ancestral memory, the memory printed in our DNA, the past experiences of our ancestors that gives us knowledge, stored in the depths of our very existence, that makes us act on certain occasions, on impulse and by instinct. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, both combined and at work with one another, we awake the hidden secrets deeply stored in our mind. And so we awake and reach a higher understanding. But it's also curious to know that Algis in Gothic means swan. So indeed, the form of this rune might be the stylized representation of birds' feet, flying high into the skies and back. In Norse mythology, Valkyriur, Valkyries, are protective spiritual beings who either fly by means of magical cloaks made of swan feathers, or they themselves can shapeshift into swans. Protective beings, life-giving and power-giving spiritual entities. The spiritual beings in between by which Odin himself communicates with his chosen warriors. So it does seem that this rune indeed represents the connection between the divine and humanity. It represents the very force that catches our attention and attracts our consciousness towards the divine realm. Algis is the force that awakens the mind, and so our consciousness is able to pass through the physical into the spiritual. It crosses worlds, or rather, it crosses perception, because life is nothing more than a certain perspective whose limitations must be crossed in order to change that perspective and learn about new perceptions. Algis is the rune of consciousness and awareness. Just look at the rune. Doesn't it also resemble the stylized representation of a human being with its arms stretched out upwards, with its legs close together and feet firmly planted on the ground? As I've said before, if I'm not mistaken, on the video about Meigin, in many cultures, the reception of the divine power is through the hands. One of the most ancient performances in various religious ceremonies is precisely extending the arms upward with open hands and palms outward to receive the divine power and to give our own power to the divine. Ingwas, perhaps more commonly known by the name Ingus. This is a rune connected to the earth god Ing and this god himself, with close parallels with the Old Norse Vanir god Freyr. This is a rune representative of the fruitful attributes expressed in male sexuality, and this symbolism transported to the fruitfulness and fertility of the soils in relation to agriculture. Therefore, perhaps we could say this is a rune of growth, specifically related to the growth of the male figure. In modern-day paganism, the male figure is often neglected as a potential source of magic and mystery. Sadly, in great part, modern paganism still clings to the late classical period and early medieval period notion that women are prone to works of magic. Of course, in time, in history, progressively evolving towards or indeed becoming malign figures of society as the religions of the state developed and gained ground. The stigmatization of the male figure as a practitioner of any magical art led men to lose their sensitivity, lose their sensibility towards the supernatural. A series of rules and canons were imposed on the male figure, a series of social roles to play that led men to abandon the traditional folk beliefs and be far more integrated into the mechanics of a patriarchal system, in which the male figure became the center of it as the benefactor and bringer of justice and righteousness and order, while the female figure in a patriarchal society, Ingwas, not only is related to male sexuality, but also we could say that Ingwas is also a rune of internal growth, personal development towards the mysterious forces that lie within, in the human consciousness, which the male figure also has access to and should develop, lest it becomes yet another brainless follower of the oppressive system in which it was inserted. A system always more preoccupied in defining gender roles rather than preoccupied with the well-being of its citizens and the impact that same system has on the psychological level of its citizens. So, in this aspect, Ingwas helps to break that stigma, helps to break those social rules towards gender, and gives the opportunity for the male figure to also come in contact and indeed interact with the supernatural, free from judgment, and stop feeling guilty or afraid to be frowned upon by what the society decided it was the proper way of doing things. So Ingwas is related to the male mysteries as well. In order for the earth to be fertile and to grow and give origins to life and continue to be fruitful, and life may continue to thrive, it needs the potential that lies within both the male and the female polarities existing in the natural world and, of course, throughout the universe. Ingwas focuses much more on the male potential and its role in the expression of life, its role in the origins and continuation of life. Just as the earth has a gestation period in order to develop and grow, so too the male figure needs a gestation period in order to develop its innermost abilities. Ingwas is also the gestation process of humanity, but in general of man. And men, certainly more than women, I think, need to embrace this gestation process rather than neglecting it and moving forward, trying to keep up with what society demands of man. And on the other hand, men follow those demands because they are afraid to disappoint their own society and step outside the norms and what was accepted to be the normal conduct for the male figure. Which is why many men reach an older age and they still feel empty, completely outside their surroundings, and have a hard time to achieve happiness and completely fail to have that sense of fulfillment and wholeness. Because they were never in tune with themselves, with their inner child, their inner potential, because they have always been forced to abandon who they were, to abandon their dreams, their deepest desires, in order to follow what is demanded of them in the society they have been inserted. Fertility is a source of power. It is a flowing energy that lies within everything. And fertility isn't just to make more life. Ingwas, this rune Ingwas, expresses the fertility of the mind as well, the healthy state of mind achieved through the acceptance of one's inner child. The fertility of peace in one's own mind and project and express that towards life. Being fertile in the freedom of thought and focus much more on life and be free to enjoy the many pleasures life has to offer. Fertility doesn't have to be just a synonym for sex and reproduction. Fertility itself is life, and life is all there is. This rune, Ingwas, is the rune of life and all that it encompasses. The life that it is often denied from both men and women in these societies we live in, because such societies do not permit us to be fully integrated in life itself. Rather, we spend an awful lot of time trying to fit into society and fervently want to be part of it, to feel that we belong in this race towards the illusion that by behaving according to what was stipulated, we shall then be obviously integrated, and therefore we will achieve fulfillment and a sense of wholeness. A sense of wholeness and fulfillment can never be achieved by seeking to be accepted in a panorama in which you must become equal to everybody else. A sense of wholeness and fulfillment, I think, is to accept your own uniqueness, and that uniqueness being integrated in a panorama without boundaries, where you don't have to forcibly become something or equal to another, but you just have to be. And by being yourself, you can develop your inner potential. Utala, homelands and ancestral roots. The long line of humanity that has progressively walked out from a primordial stage, always moving forward, aiming towards evolution, and we are the product of that evolution. And it is our duty to maintain the flow of life and evolution, because what we do in life will influence future generations. If we want a better world, if we want the ancestral line to continue and become better than what it was before, it is our duty to leave a legacy worthy to be taken by our future generations. And from that point, they might learn and continue to evolve just like we did. As you remember, the previous rune was Inguas, or the rune Ing, or perhaps more commonly known as Ingus. It is the rune of peace and plenty, of fertility and joy, of enlightenment and good blessings, a rune of wealth, both material and spiritual, a wealth of knowledge, and an entire process of learning until we reach a certain level of wisdom, a rune of internal growth, personal development, a sense of wholeness. So what will an individual do with such blessings? After reaching such an important point of deep wisdom, personal development, growth, being blessed with fertility, prosperity, peace, and plenty, an individual has a duty to perform, to leave behind a legacy, a story to tell, to spread the blessings, spread the knowledge for future generations, being the beacon of hope and peace and plenty. And as such, the individual becomes the very starting point for future generations, creating its community, its space. Indeed, the previous rune, Inguas, in its configuration is an individual space. So what better rune to follow it if not Othala? Watch closely the shape of Inguas, and if you add to it 2 little legs, it becomes Othala. The individual space gains roots, and so those roots spread into the rest of the community, and will connect with other individual spaces, spreading the knowledge, spreading the ancestral wisdom. The previous rune, Inguas, represents the individual, and now the individual evolves and gains 2 little legs as the representation of a human being who can walk, move forward, ready to walk the ancestral line, spreading the knowledge gained since the very beginning. Ready to move forward and make its own community, its clan, tribe, its family, and forming a home, its own space of existence where others can share and spread the wisdom and maintain it alive so future generations can have access to such wisdom. The individual grows, evolves, and creates its legacy, creates its homeland, where the roots of the past go deep and deeper still as the generations move forward with the wisdom of their ancestors. That's our duty, to leave a legacy and plant our roots somewhere so future generations may thrive with the peace, prosperity, wealth, and plenty we have left. If in this life we reach a point of great wisdom and enlightenment, it is our duty to reach out to all others and help them to reach deep wisdom as well. It is our duty to give them the tools so they can dig deep for themselves and find the ancestral roots, so they too may reach enlightenment. For what good is wisdom if we can't make a better world with it? And a better world can only be created if knowledge continues to spread. It starts to make a little bit more sense why I chose to speak about Othala after Ingwas and not Degas. Because Degas is the dawn, the rebirth, the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new one. Because when we finally plant our roots in a place and the legacy is assured, we can now rest and move forward towards evolution, towards a new dawn, a new beginning, a rebirth which will bring us back to the joy of life in a brighter future. Some people like to end it with Othala, with homeland and legacy, but I do not believe that is truly the end. After we plant our roots and leave a legacy, it's time for a new dawn, a new day, a new hope, and the journey continues, because one legacy isn't enough, and we must carry on with life. Now, due to this understanding of homeland behind Othala and its configuration, which seems to be the stylized representation of a space but belonging to an individual, thus becoming the representation of an individual in its own space or place, possibly, this rune has been connected to property and owning a place, the household, the estate, where one plants its roots and grows and one's efforts and perseverance bear fruits. It's the privilege and the luck and the right to own a land and make a living, to be the kings and queens of our own little space of existence. It is the right to have a shelter and the right to have peace and a place we can call home, a place where we know we belong. The rune of the family and the history of a family. Othala is the space with its limits, and within there is protection. The rune related to finding one's roots, finding a place where we can call home, and from that point we create a legacy. We create our own history, the right to have a history, to leave a mark upon this world and create a safe space for our children and obviously for our children's children and all the generations to come. It is a beacon of hope, peace and safety, and all others are welcome to it for as long as they respect the peace, maintain hope, and strive to preserve the sense of safety. Since ancient times, in many different cultures, the cult of the ancestors was held precisely within one's property. Owning a property and the right to keep it wasn't because the land had been bought for, but because in that land one's ancestors were buried. Their spirits remained within the household, and in the fields the ancestral line was in that land. As such, the property belonged to the family whose ancestors were there, buried, and the ancestral cult was a means to maintain a healthy connection with the ancestors and being guided by their wisdom and keep them happy so they could send their blessings upon the living. The cult of the flame, the everlasting fire that burns in the hearth, in the fireplace, in the center of the house. For as long as the flame is lit, hope remains. This is the hearth cult, which is part of the ancestral cult. In ancient societies, one of the very first things a particular tribe, clan, people, or civilization would do upon arriving to a new land and conquering it was to go into the highest place and build a fire. And that was it. The proof that that land was now theirs, because the fire had been lit, the very element of hope, and around it the family is built, the civilization is built, and spreads and grows and thrives, and its roots go deeper and spread. The flame spreads, bringing new hope. Othala represents a person's roots and historical foundations, a rune of protection, the rune of homeland, the rune of the tribe, and all of those who would like to join it and be under the protection and safety of this rune. All those who seek shelter and peace and safety, and they too want to have a place they can call home and share such peace and plenty. Peace and safety brings happiness, and a happy person is more likely to find the good in all things. And in goodness, we find love. And the person that is loved and can love back is less likely to feel hatred and spread such hatred and destroy every effort to maintain the peace. It is with love, understanding, and welcoming arms that we spread the peace. If someone can feel that they belong, they will be more inclined to maintain the peace because they feel welcomed and they know they are part of something great and good, worth fighting for and worth protecting and maintaining. It's no coincidence that in the past, among many ancient societies, and of course, obviously, among the Old Norse people as well, hospitality was a virtue and the best gift one could give to a stranger. Make the stranger feel protected, feel at home, give them hospitality, and they will feel loved and wanted, and the friendship might be built that will endure a lifetime. And the stranger shall one day become familiar and gift back the hospitality that was once given with more hospitality when times change, because they will, and we lose our home and need a place to call home and feel safe. We give hospitality and the other must respect that hospitality. Under one person's roof, the guest has both rights and duties, the right of protection and peace, and the duty to maintain that protection and peace. Breaking the hospitality that was given is something the gods never forget and never forgive. So, Othala is the rune of relatives and family, the ancestors. It is the rune of homeland and legacy, our sacred space in the world, the roots of our history. It is the rune of creating a better space of existence, a place of peace and plenty and happiness, fertility, safety, protection and love, and the spreading of such qualities and powers so others may also enjoy such blessings. This makes Othala the rune of prosperity as well, the prosperity of the group, the prosperity of the community. All are welcome to join the community. The more the merrier, and the community grows stronger and prospers, for as long as those in it continue to work on to maintain a healthy connection to one another, and all working towards a common goal, and that is striving to maintain a prosperous community where all feel protected and loved. It is also the rune of the family, as I've said, extended to the clan and to the tribe and into the fields and the lands. It is the rune of the nation, the human homeland, which is the extended family. And it is this precious feeling of knowing we belong somewhere and that we are wanted and loved. That is the true definition of homeland. It is the place where we are welcomed and we feel like we belong. There's no greatest feeling, because knowing that we belong somewhere, from that point we shall find everything else. And everything else will come to us, because we belong, because we are wanted, and as such, we are part of that community, and we have the same rights and duties, and we are integrated in the community, and we have a part to play in it, to maintain the peace and protection and safety and plenty and love. Othala is the rune of safety and stability, but how do we reach safety and stability? Well, after a long process of personal growth and all the wisdom gathered throughout your course of existence, all that wisdom expressed in the previous runes, you now reach a point of deep wisdom, which will give you an inner sense of safety and stability. You can never find safety and stability and peace and happiness if you do not find that first within you. All the knowledge we gather through life is very important for self-growth, as long as we know how to apply that knowledge and act correctly in each circumstance and in each obstacle life has to give. So we grow, we evolve, we become better, and eventually we find safety and stability within, and only then can we express that into the exterior and spread it to others. In our modern societies, we live unhappy, absolutely depressed. There's a feeling of not belonging. Indeed, we feel detached and disconnected from something we don't even quite know what it actually is, because we simply feel hopeless in our societies, because we are being explored, because we are willing slaves of the system, and our societies keep exploring us and all the natural resources of the world to the point of collapse, until the spirit of the very land can't take it any longer. Our societies will only thrive when humanity understands that the only way to live in this world is by building a symbiotic relationship with our environment. Othala helps to understand and to achieve that, because there's no prosperity if we deplete every resource, if we enslave every life to the point of exhaustion, and eventually a collapse from which nothing is able to return from. In this way, Othala is also the rune of protection of the community, and showing respect towards its members, towards this greater global community. Respect and protection for our homeland, humanity's homeland, the world we live in, the only one we have. So now we get to the point where and when we can truly choose every path we want, and indeed experience everything that is possible, because the places where we were born, the society where we have been raised or inserted, the morals, laws, values, notions, conceptions, and of course cultural constructions may represent us in certain aspects to a certain extent, but will never truly define us. We become free from structured systems of identity, and as such we find our true selves. And therefore there is a rebirth of the self, a new day, a new era, a completely new life. And that is Degas, that is enlightenment. No longer the necessity to seek a label, to seek an identity, to seek a place where we belong and to be inserted in a specific group, no longer the need to choose a path. With enlightenment, we know perfectly well who we are. We do not need a self-conception of identity. We do not need to become. We just need to exist. And for as long as we exist, we can take whatever path we want within the endless multitude of options that open up before us, because we no longer identify ourselves with something specific, and therefore we no longer need to choose a path that fits into what we used to identify ourselves with. We exist, we just are, and continue to be. Therefore, there won't be limitations imposed by the confusing deceptions of our cultural constructions. And we wake up from the collective nightmare of civilization, which gave us a conditioning line of thought in which we have created the perspective of a highly constrained universe. Degas is awakening. Degas is literally the day or dawn. For many pagan societies of the past, and perhaps none more so than the peoples of Northern Europe, a new day did not start at midnight as we comprehend nowadays. Instead, a day started with the rising of the sun, with the dawn, with the first rays of the sun that pierced the darkness. Nights may be longer than we expect, and many terrors assail the human mind in our darkest hours, and there's always the fear of not seeing another day. So when dawn comes, we know we have made it and there's a new chance for us. There's continuation. We know that at least we have one more day and the world is still here. We are still here. Each day is a new opportunity. Degas is the rune of awakening, the rune of hope, and hope is the force that makes us move and carry on, continue forward in search for a better life, a better outcome, the force that gives us enthusiasm and prevents stagnation. As we say around here, hope is the last thing to die, for as long as there is hope, there is life. The yew had its role in funerary cults, and because being an evergreen tree and in fact the greenest wood you can find during winter, it was associated with immortality. And here's where it gets interesting. When we mixture science with spiritual beliefs, the needles of the yew tree are poisonous. They contain a toxin that affects the central nervous system. This toxin can be prepared to be used as a powerful hallucinogen. On warm days, the yew emits this toxin and its vapors are concentrated in close proximity to the tree. This can cause hallucinations to any individual who stands right beneath its branches. Now just imagine the impact this scientific discovery has on the concept of Yggdrasil being the tree Huden used to obtain the secret knowledge of the runes. Think about the entire shamanic connotations surrounding this mythological account. So this also helps to reinforce the fact that Yggdrasil was indeed a yew tree and not an ash, and Huden used its hallucinogenic properties in his shamanic initiation to obtain the secrets contained on the other side. Thus, the connection of this rune, yew, was with initiation, movement towards enlightenment, the mysteries of life and death itself. Huden died in Yggdrasil to obtain primordial wisdom. In a shamanic sense, death is understood as the great initiation into the mysteries of life. To die before we die physically is to discover what is hidden from us, the secret primordial powers. This death to obtain hidden knowledge can be observed in the result of near-death experiences. This is also why I've said previously that this rune is associated with the spiritual endurance we gain to set ourselves free from the fear of death, or rather the fear of physical death, because that fear is one of the greatest traumas that prevents us from truly living in freedom, to have freedom of the mind.
And just now I had the inspiration to actually make a mandala drawing class, weekend workshop or something like that. And I saw myself buying the paper for the people, and invite them. I never did something like that before.
It's because this mushroom is the gatekeeper. And you have to see that video where I talk about the role it plays, but those memories are locked up inside your brain. And your brain closes them up and hides them away as your permanent operating system, and you are not supposed to make changes to that hard drive. This mushroom makes changes to that hard drive. Therefore, the hard drive is the gatekeeper to everything you do in your life. And this mushroom is the gatekeeper to everything that you will do with entheogens and your spirituality. This mushroom will leave you the fuck out. And this mushroom will reflect right back in your face who the fuck you are. Whether you want to know it or not, if you've got a carefully created sense of self, but you think that you're all pieced out and woke, this mushroom will yank everything out from under you and go, now what, bitch?
This is not the proper light, so the colors come out a bit weird. But anyway, it's taking shape.
Coming back and saying, okay, I feel a sense of purpose. I feel a drive. I feel like the reason I am here is, and then you feel like moving toward that goal.
Yes.
You feel this passion, this drive, and that's what I do here with this channel. All of that, what is that? Where's that coming from? That childlike wonder. The feeling of your sense of space and ownership of it, of reaching goals, of joy, of connection, and a sense of purpose. Drive. That. Where's that coming from? Some people say
Yes.
spirit, God, the ether, the mushroom. I agree, but it's got to get here through a human counterpart, and that's the ego. So your sense of laughter, joy, gratitude, those are emotions that had to get funneled through the ego for you to feel them in your physical body, right? Drive, goals, ambition, and passion to make a channel, to draw something of beauty, to write. Anything that we create, passion to create, comes to us through that ego. And without it, when that ego is damaged or broken, our human is broken. The meat sack gets broken. Everything starts to wither. And when there's nothing left here, you want to not be here anymore. If you
Yeah,
are
so
using the
true.
meat sack, Amanita is the ego mushroom. It is your sense of self. It's the entheogen that is here to help the human on that level, your relationship to the self. The Amanita works on your perceptions of yourself, your sense of boundaries, your rights, your ego, embracing your ego, loving yourself, and your sense of ownership. Before Christianity, they worshipped this mushroom and the psilocybin because they knew it was the medicine to control your sense of self, to help ease your pain of stress, panic, anxiety, but also of oppression and pain and difficulty, and owning your sense of presence, your motivation to get things done, your drive, your ambition.
Yes, work in progress. And I really like it. This has been such an interesting process, this particular mandala. It was really not spontaneous this time, and all the energy that went into it, it was like a birthing process of what I was doing at the same time with the red healer. And then perspective changes, and you put that into the mandala as well. So I'm just as surprised as some people who have said this is very different from other mandalas. Yeah, we will see the end result at some point. It's very interesting how this mandala is still morphing and changing. So I have changed this color into this color. Now it's some kind of dark red. You get totally pulled in by the art you do, and this excitement comes up. This is so fulfilling. I enjoy this process. So much excitement about how this is developing, and that's the joy. that I am being pointed towards this fulfillment. It makes you feel alive. Yeah.
You feel driven to create art about it.
This morning I finally got the idea how I want to do the antlers that I was sure had to be added in this mandala, because with all the runes and feathers and the whole process I went through during this time creating the mandala, seeing the deer in the forest. So that was the plan, but this corner remained empty. And only this morning I had the idea how I could do it. So this is the result, and they are red.
Sven's antlers turned red because he's shedding.
Yes, it's a sign they are fully matured and ready for the mating season. So, while you're behind your screens feeling bad for the poor lad, he can't wait to begin his mating rituals, which involves tons of battles with his competition, and his new set of strong antlers come in handy. Now, let me explain the process a little better. Male deer or stags have velvets, some sort of covering over their developing antlers, which are assumed to act as weatherproof for cold times of the year. But it does more than that. The velvet is a concentrated network of blood vessels and nerves that protects and nourishes the hardened antlers underneath, helping them grow big and strong. After 5 months of having its cute-looking multi-purpose velvet, the velvet bursts open into red rags from the deer's rack of antlers, and then the deer rubs it against trees and even bites off hanging pieces they can reach. And on the question of if this is actually a painful process for the stags, I would say winning their mating rights and the benefits that come with it are far greater than any pain they may or may not feel.
White reindeer spirit taught me only blessings and expansion can give us cleaner hearts so that we may become more fully human. And when people ask me, what's your greatest blessing? I always answer, like a reindeer, I love to wander and just be in the vastness of nature while listening to the sound I make with my antlers.
And that's the end result. Usually my mandala videos are way shorter than this one, but for once I wanted to include all the symbolism with explanation. So here you see a Celtic cross, circle, and all the runes, which I included in a particular order. So my mandalas are very much about symbolism, and the symbols you see are always stylized, like those antlers and the amanita mushroom within the flame. You can interpret this whichever way you like, but to me, as the creator of this mandala, this means growth and becoming independent, removing all the chains, especially the mental ones. So there is a big shift happening, and throughout this process of creating this mandala, all of that has gone into this mandala. So there is this particular energy of change. Now I added the white dots. So to make it stand out a bit from this part, as these colors are quite similar. But still, in a close-up, you see that it's really this purplish, brownish red, which I really love how it came out. I didn't plan on it. It was a completely different color in the beginning. And now it's more harmonious with the other colors. Doesn't bite. I hate when colors bite each other. They have to belong to the same family, so to speak. If it's too wild, then there is no harmony in the drawing. And that's kind of unsettling. So I like there to be some kind of harmony, because there is already quite a lot of movement in the drawing. So the colors need to be in harmony with each other. Finally, one corner is finished. However, I feel here it's too plain. I might add something of this here. You hear in the background this drum music. This is Amanita Dreamer and her friends on the winter solstice 2020. And this music is really inspiring. Perfect for drawing mandalas, actually. Almost finished. Now this side needs to be done. Now I added the triskele or triskelion, and finally it feels complete. The meaning of the triskele is diverse, varied, and has many possibilities. The triskele can be thought to represent motion, as all three arms are positioned to make it appear as if it is moving outwards from its center. Movement or motion is believed to signify energies, in particular within this Celtic symbol, the motion of action, cycles, progress, revolution, and competition. Some of these connotations include life, death, rebirth, spirit, mind, body, mother, father, child, past, present, future, power, intellect, love, and creation, preservation, destruction, to name but a few.
freedom.